Still on?
Yep, we're on.
And the clock is ticking.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on this matter of public importance, the failure of the government to address Australia's deteriorating fiscal position. And it's good to follow the Minister for Trade, but I can't say that much of what he detailed here in the chamber was relevant to the topic. Perhaps he could have been more relevant if he gave us one of his improv karaoke renditions of Horror Movie, because, and maybe it could be in tune this time, because Horror Movie really is what we've got with Australia's current fiscal position. And indeed, it is because of that that it is a matter of urgent public importance, because the fiscal mess that this government is creating is a mess that the public will be left to clean up. Today's debt is tomorrow's taxes. Our children will pay the price of this government's reckless waste through taxes and lost opportunities. This government's failure to address Australia's deteriorating fiscal position is this government's selling out of our children's future. But according to the Treasurer, that's not a problem. That's not a problem, he says. Our escalating debt isn't a problem, he reckons. Move along, nothing to see here. If you want to know why this Labor government is failing to address the problem, it's because they deny there's a problem in the first place. And here's what the Treasurer says about this nation's debt, the excuse for incompetence that he dusts off and trots out on a weekly basis. He says, compare us with other major advanced economies. He just loves to compare Australia to a handful, actually, of the worst performing economies in the world, not the big resource economies that are out there like ours, but the ones that are floundering and that are currently groaning under enormous debt levels. And that's his aim. That's where he wants us to be. He knows we're a long way back, but boy, oh boy, he's trying to catch him. It was a late start because he had to overcome the handicap of actually having some cash in the bank and a strong economy when he took the reins. But he's coming through with a late surge. I mean, he's got the blinkers on and he's riding that one-trick pony home. And he is going to catch him, Mr Deputy Speaker. He is. And here's how much he's gaining on him. In the outline of the economy, he laments the fact that the size of the task before him might actually be beyond him. He says, and quote, even at its peak, net debt will be a tiny fraction of the average of the major advanced economies. Then there was this encouragement from the cheer squad from the Prime Minister in a speech to the Queensland Media Club on the 12th of October 2010, where she said, Australia's net debt is lower than any major advanced economy. Our net debt will peak at 6% of GDP in 2011-12. Now let's skip ahead to what the Treasurer said in my EFO, the mid-year budget update in October last year. Quote, the average net debt position of the major advanced economies is projected to peak at 95% of GDP in 2016, almost 10 times higher than the expected peak in Australia's net debt of 10% of GDP in 2011-12. So from October 2010 to October 2012, Labor's forecast for net debt changes from 6% to 10% of GDP. He's catching him. He's catching him, Mr Deputy Speaker. He's coming in with a late run. And the truth is that those opposite actually have no idea when net debt will peak, because in government, Labor will never see net debt peak. It'll just keep on going up and up because they've got no idea how to stop it from growing. And it's very easy, Wayne. It's easy. Just spend less than what you earn. Spend less than what you earn. There's 7 million households in Australia, in the real Australia out there, that understand that fact. But the world's luckiest treasurer, or whatever Euromoney magazine named him, he can't quite grasp that fact. Poor old Swan, he can't get his head around how a household budget actually works. And he wants to. He tries really, really hard. And I can picture him, sitting there at the kitchen table doing his homework, a firm grip on the crayon, a wrinkled brow, biting his tongue. And after much constipated endeavour, he works his sums hard enough to come up with the debt analogy that he loves the most. Even the Prime Minister has picked it up and run with it. If I can return to a quote of hers that I used earlier from the Queensland Media Club, she said, our net debt will peak at 6% of GDP in 2011-12. And the next line was straight out of Swanee Jr.'s Big Book of Sums, and he said, equivalent to someone who earns $100,000 a year taking out a $6,000 loan. I'm sorry, the Treasurer Jr.'s Big Book of Sums. Equivalent to someone who earns $100,000 a year taking out a $6,000 loan. Well, that's what he said. A couple of months earlier, the Treasury used the same line on the doorstep, 4th of August 2010, net debt's at 6%. He said that's equivalent to someone who's earning $100,000 a year borrowing $6,000 a year. But on the 22nd of November 2011, we had Minister for Industrial Relations upping the ante. Commonwealth government debt is at 7%. That's the equivalent of $7,000 out of a GDP of $100,000. By the latter half of the next year, the Treasurer was crowing on ABC, 16th of October 2012, our debt in international standards is very, very low. It's like someone earning $100,000 a year owing a modest $10,000. Up and up it goes, and that's lovely. But the problem with comparing your debt to everyone else's income is not a very good analogy. Viewing debt as a percentage of GDP might be useful if you're comparing it with other countries, especially like other countries with similar economies, resource-based economies. But to use the figures to compare to a mortgage is just as reckless as your spending, as the government's spending, Mr Deputy Speaker, not yours. GDP is produced by everyone, and the 7 million households out there that have their own debt to worry about, they have their own debts to worry about, and when their mortgages are paid off, they will actually have a house. But what will the government have? What will the Treasurer have to service his debt is government income raised mainly through taxes. Government income, which can be used to service government debt, is $329.9 billion in 2011-12. That's what we collected in revenue last year, $329.9 billion. So let's take the Treasurer to the bank manager and see if he can get a loan like the one he describes as tiny and very, very low. And, Mr Swan to the bank manager, I want a loan for $144 billion, Mr Bank Manager. That's the net debt that we've currently got. And the bank manager, certainly Mr Swan, what was your income last year? Mr Swan, it was roughly about $330 billion.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I've been very tolerant, but the point of order is that the member continually refers to the Deputy Prime Minister inappropriately and should refer to his correct title.
Parliamentary Secretary has made a point of order. The member for Dawson will refer to members by their title or their relevant ministry.
To the bank customer as the Treasurer. So the Treasurer walks in, I want a loan for $144 billion, Mr Bank Manager. Certainly, Mr Treasurer. What was your income last year? It was around $330 billion. OK, well, Mr Treasurer, let's go through your actual expenditure here. And, oh boy, it looks like you've got a lot of dependents. I've got down here, you've got a lot of welfare recipients, foreign aid's increasing. You're letting other people into your household as well, asylum seeker. You're increasing expenditure on that. I see that you've bought some school halls that are actually the value on them is about half of actually what you've paid for them. And what's this purchase here for flammable pink bats? What's that all about, Mr Treasurer? I mean, after the bank manager's gone through the books and had a look at all the expenditure, he turns to the Treasurer and he'd say, so, Mr Treasurer, what was actually your expenditure last year? And the Treasurer mumbles, what was that, Mr Treasurer? Oh, it was about $374 billion. Mr Treasurer, that's about $43 billion more than actually what you earned. You're spending more than what you earned. Mr Treasurer, how are you going to actually pay back this loan that you're trying to get from me? And he says, oh, well, that's easy. I'll just come back to you and I'll get another loan, and I'll pay the interest off with that. I'll get another loan and I'll pay the interest off of that. And that's what the government is doing, raising the debt ceiling again and again to take out another loan to pay off the interest that this nation currently has. Right. And that loan will get even bigger next year. He'll raise the debt ceiling again and borrow more money to pay that interest. And we see something from the West Australian today where they actually state that. The interest bill on the nation's $267 billion gross debt to be revealed when the budget is handed down on May 14th is expected to be $1 billion worse and could be pushed even further. That is a terrible legacy to leave for our nation, a terrible legacy because today's debt, Mr Deputy Speaker, the debt that this government has engaged in is tomorrow's taxes. We are saddling a whole generation to this, and the money that we're using to spend on interest is not going into worthy infrastructure projects around the nation which would otherwise be funded.
Order, call the